Hello everybody, and welcome back to my Axis and Allies channel. I want to talk about two different things in this video. The first one is just a quick note about Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition, and then the other one I'd like to talk a little bit about War Room. I had a chance to go up to the frozen tundra of Wisconsin. It's a couple hours north of me to visit Big E, where he's from, and got a chance to demo that game with some folks, so that was a good time. I'm going to spend most of the video on that. In fact, that is going to be kind of a review, my thoughts on the game itself, both positive and negative. I just want to give you guys my honest opinion on it, and regardless of any comments made, I greatly appreciate Big E. I greatly appreciate Larry Harris for giving out a prototype copy so that gamers such as myself and Big E have the opportunity to give it a try. Now, before I get into that, I did say I wanted to mention Anniversary Edition. I'm going to use that as my backdrop here. And what I wanted to comment on, and it's been mentioned in a few other videos, my boards, my mat boards have begun to warp. You can kind of see right there. Now, several others have commented on that. In fact, this is what my board looks like after sitting in the box with all of the individual pieces, or individual boxes, like the Germany box and the Japanese box and the Soviet box, all sitting on top of it trying to flatten it out for roughly a month or so. Since right around the time I made my last video, I actually packed everything up and put those boards back in the box and put everything else that comes in the box on top of it to try and flatten them out. So this is actually better than they were at the time. They were getting pretty bad, but you can still definitively see, you can easily slide a quarter, maybe 2 quarters under each one of these boards. And so I reached out to Wizards of the Coast, as some others have. I was a little bit hesitant to do that. I know everybody's had an easy time with it, at least from the videos that I've seen online, but I was a little bit hesitant to do it. The thought being, I'm not really concerned about the internal boxes being slightly indented. I did notice that a little bit with mine, but when the boards themselves started warping, that was when I wanted to try getting them flattened out myself, but when I met only marginal success, even after a long period of having weights on them, I decided it was time to reach out. And they pretty much got back to me within 1 business day and just said, hey, what's your information? And we'll send you another copy, no questions asked. Now, I did upload to them from the get-go a picture of the board with a quarter under each one of the panels, so they could see, yes, I do in fact own the game, yes, it is in fact warping, just in case they had any questions. It sounds like they're pretty darn good about taking care of this, but I didn't want to give any indication or cause them any thought or any concern that I might not have a legitimate claim. So I went ahead and uploaded that, and they immediately got back to me, like I said, within 1 business day, and just said, yeah, just send us your contact information, your address, and we'll ship you another copy. So that should be coming. Pretty excited about that. Hopefully that one does not have the same board warping issues as this one did. If it does, then I guess I just have 2 copies of it. As long as at least one of them is still playable, I'm not going to reach out to them again. I know it's something they've been doing, but I think it's extremely generous that they're not asking me to send anything back. They didn't ask for any documentation. Maybe if I had not provided a picture, maybe they would have asked for that, but basically they just said, all right, we'll send you something. So very happy with them on that front. Now, while the rest of this video is going to be about War Room, I will use this as a backdrop just because I do not have a tripod. I didn't spring for that. And in fact, someone made a comment in Big E's video he was shooting at the time of the War Room demo that Jonathan Meyer's face is finally seen for the first time on YouTube, which is true. And maybe one day I will get a tripod and then I can have drinks with Jonathan, like drinks with Sired Blood or something like that. But that day is not today. All right, so I wanted to talk about War Room a little bit. Like I said, extremely grateful to Big E that he gave me the honor of sending me an invite to this event. Very grateful to Larry Harris for loaning out a copy or giving out a copy. I don't know exactly what his arrangements are with Big E, but that is super exciting that gamers like he, like myself, get a chance to demo it, that he gets a chance to get some videos up explaining, the basics of it. I did take a look at a few of them before going to Wisconsin, but there is nothing, at least in my opinion, there is nothing that can replace actually being with somebody as they're walking through the rules. Now, there are a lot of things that go on in War Room. It tries to do a lot of things, and I very much enjoyed the concepts of what it's trying to do in a number of different ways. And so I want to walk through those things. For a video like this, usually I just kind of ad hoc it or ad lib it. I actually took some notes on this one. So one of the things that I like about War Room is the turn order and the fact that it is not the same order every single time in the game. You actually bid, you have a couple different types of resources. What is it? Oil, and then either like coal or steel, and then all other resources basically. I might be getting those mixed up, but I know oil is one of them. And basically at the start of your turn, you're producing so much oil, and it's based on what territory you control, and you can bid oil. And whoever bids the highest, yes, you lose that oil, but you get to pick your turn order. So it's really important for you to go first because maybe you're Germany and you want to make sure your troops get on the move before the Soviet Union's troops get on the move. You might bid high oil. Maybe you know how much oil the Soviet Union has, and so you're going to bid one more. Maybe you don't know how much they have, and so you just want to place a high bid in the hopes that you get to go before them. Because once turn order is decided, you start revealing orders, and every country basically goes at the same time, except for. So let me back that up. That's kind of a convoluted way of saying it. So everybody decides what orders they want to give simultaneously and in secret, which is kind of cool. And then the order, the orders are executed in a particular order. So if, like on this board, you've got the Soviets over here, the Germans here. If the Soviets had an order that said, hey, we're going to move into Poland, but the Germans had an order that said we're going to move from Bulgaria, Romania to East Poland, and from Poland to East Poland. If the Soviets went first, their guys would be in Poland before Germany got a chance to do anything. If Germany goes first, then its units are here. The Russian attempt basically gets completely blocked because their guys are tied down here. Now, there's all sorts of different combinations. That's a very basic one. So you decide your orders at the same time, but then the orders are executed in a particular order, and winning the bid on oil lets you pick where you want to go in terms of the execution of your orders. And then whoever bid the second highest gets to pick second and third highest and so forth. So I do like that. One concern, or one thing that I did notice about that, so I like that it's both, you decide your orders in secret, and turn order isn't always the same. And you can kind of prioritize. How important is it on this turn versus the next turn to go first? One of the concerns that I did have about that is I felt that in certain circumstances it can actually limit strategic talk between allies and take extra time, because allies might, or Axis, countries that are aligned with each other, those players might spend a fair amount of time talking things out, deciding what they want to do, and then if one of them gets blocked, let's say they're highly coordinated in their efforts, and then one of them gets blocked, that either throws all three of them off, because Italy is Italy a playable country? I can't remember if Italy's a playable country. Well, it throws all of the countries on that side off, and then they either are thrown into chaos, or they're going to have to take even more time. Okay, let's rediscuss and figure out what needs to be done. Let's see, another thing, and this kind of gets back into that. I do like the secretive component about the orders, and the fact that you can only issue so many orders per country. So in that game, unlike Axis and Allies, where you have individual units, you actually have basically stacks of units together, and everything in a stack is like a battle group, or it might have a special name in that game, I'm not sure. But you issue one order per battle group. You can also split battle groups into two or combine them to either consolidate your orders, move more forces with fewer orders, or if you have a big stack and you want to send some one direction and some another direction, you can do that. But you only have a limited number of orders that you can make on any given turn, which I do like that. Let's see, what else do I have? And there's also, in that game, there are trains, and trains basically, assuming you aren't blocked by an enemy force, or there's some enemy combat unit coming into play, on a train you can basically move an unlimited distance from friendly to friendly. Which is kind of cool. When I was playing in the Soviet Union, I actually moved my guys all the way over here against Japan, all the way to the Eastern Front, basically on a single turn, which helped me get more forces over here where they were badly needed. So that was kind of neat. I kind of felt like that might be a little overpowered. Getting troops over that quickly might be a little bit of a stretch. But that just comes down to personal preference. I did enjoy that ability. I think it does add a dynamic, especially if because depending on how an enemy moves in a certain area, you might be planning to move along a rail, and then that rail line gets cut off or something like that. And so it does make certain territories more strategic because they're along rail lines. Or they have rails running through them, and I do like that. I think that adds a nice level of strategy to it, just above and beyond all the territories. One thing that War Room focuses heavily on is the combat. Now, in Axis and Allies, you move your units in. If you are attacking or defending, you have certain values you roll. Casualties are taken. You keep going until the attacker retreats or one side is completely destroyed. Well, in War Room, even if you are moving your forces in to attack, you can pick what stance you want, not only per unit type, but even per unit. So let's say you have 4 infantry, you could set 2 of those infantry in an offensive stance and 2 of them in a defensive stance. So you really have to think through kind of the tactical level of the situation. You also resolve air combat first. And you could have airplanes fighting other airplanes, or you can say, I'm going to, have these airplanes strafe the ground forces, and there's all sorts of different combinations. So there is a lot of uniqueness, and there is a lot of thought that needs to go into that at the tactical level, above and beyond just kind of the strategic level that we have going on the board. And that has both advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is that you can really try and optimize based on the situation. Hey, what makes sense? And you can have the same army group be good at different things depending on the situation. The flip side of that is that it is exceptionally complicated. Most people, I think, can get a good handle on risk. It's not everybody's game. Most people are able to figure it out pretty quickly. Axis and Allies is a little bit more complicated, but if you really want to learn, it's not too bad. War Room is like the jump from Risk to Axis and Allies by a few, by multiple steps, we'll say, in terms of complexity, which is both good because of the uniqueness and how much you're able to customize based on the situation, and how your knowledge of the game can really your knowledge of the game and what combinations are going to be good depending on the situation that's really going to help you. But it can also be bad because there is a significant learning curve to it, and that could discourage more casual gamers. Now you might wonder how many casual gamers are playing War Room. I really don't know, but it is exceptionally complicated, I found. And in addition to that, kind of along the same lines, you don't really have dice. You don't really have six-sided dice. I believe they're 12-sided dice, and they have different colors on them, and the colors mean different things. And so that can get complicated as well, trying to remember what do all of these colors mean. Now, after a few games, I'm sure it makes more sense, but in terms of the learning curve, that definitely is going to come into play. Let's see here. We do have contested territories. Much like in 1914, there are contested territories in War Room, which I do like. You know that 1914 is one of my favorite versions of Axis and Allies, even though it doesn't get a whole lot of love otherwise. But it is one of my favorite versions. I am a big history person, and I find that period in history particularly fascinating. So I do really enjoy that game. Contested territories come back in War Room. I was pleased to see that. I think that adds an extra tactical level to it. Not only do you have to decide where to attack and where you want to defend, but you have to consider, hey, if you don't wipe out the enemy in that territory, and now it gets bogged down, what's going to happen? Are they going to move more troops into it on their next turn? Is that going to be enough to overpower what you have sitting there, after this combat? What about your next turn? What are you going to do? And so I enjoyed seeing that appear in War Room, and I don't know if they're ever going to make another version of Axis and Allies anytime soon, but I hope that comes back in some fashion in that game as well. And I was glad to see that that's coming into play even in a World War II game like War Room, whereas before we'd only seen it in kind of the trench warfare simulation of Axis and Allies 1914. Let's see. The last comment that I want to make is about, or kind of specific comment, is about morale or stress or attrition. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but basically your country has morale, and your morale gets hurt based on the number of casualties you take. It also gets hurt when you lose certain territories, and if your morale drops too far too quickly, then additional bad things are going to happen to you. I really like the concept of that. I think that trying to integrate that into gameplay adds another dimension. So not only our country is concerned about taking territory, strategically important territory, trying to get to capitals, but just demoralizing the enemy. If we cause enough casualties, it's going to cause all sorts of internal domestic issues, which is going to make it even easier for us to swing in and take them out. And eventually, I believe that can lead to like an economic collapse, or political collapse. I think it's called something different in that game, at least the political collapse version, and the rules I'm sure are different than 1914. But it's something very similar. If the morale in your country just gets so bad, eventually the people just stop supporting the war effort and things kind of collapse. So I do like that. I think that adds a factor of realism to it. It did seem, as with some other things, to be a little bit on the complex side. And so that kind of gets to the learning curve and just the amount of time it takes to play the game. Now, for folks who are used to Axis and Allies Global, you probably won't really notice a whole lot. Global is really the only version of Axis and Allies or the only core version anyway, that I really haven't played. So I am used to probably 5 to 6 hour, maybe 7 hour games. to me, that's about the ideal. It's about how long my friends and I really have to get together. If we want to get together for a Saturday, we might meet just after lunch, and we might play until around dinner time, or maybe into early evening. But then we all need to go our separate ways because we need to get to bed and go to work the next day, or who knows what's going on. But we don't have days on end, so a 5 to 6, maybe a 7-hour game is really for me. And War Room, it goes faster once you learn it, and we were all learning it. Biggie would be the only one who really knew what was going on, and he wasn't playing. He was just trying to help us out and teach the game. It seemed like it was taking quite a bit of time, and with the steep learning curve and all of the different things going on, I definitely feel like it's a game that's going to take quite some time to play, even though technically all the moves for all the countries take place at the same time. It is a good game, and I say this not being a game designer myself. That is something that I would really like to do. Design some games. I think that'd be really fun, and I have some different ideas. So I am saying, all of this just as a gamer. Played a lot of Axis and Allies, no global, but a lot of the other versions. Big fan of Risk, all that stuff. So that's kind of where all my comments are coming from, both the knowledgeable ones as well as perhaps comments made in ignorance. So in summary, War Room, really enjoyed the opportunity. I think it's a really cool game, and there are many components that I can tell a ton of thought went into, and it attempts to do everything really well, which is excellent. The closest analogy that I can kind of draw with it, I think, is German tanks during World War II. They are of very fine quality. They, are some of the best tanks in the entire war. Tank versus tank. They try and do everything well, and for the most part, they do. But they also suffer from being overly engineered, and when you have those levels of complexity, it kind of slows everything down. It's easier for things to break down. Now, of course, a board game isn't breaking down, but I would compare that to having to stop and discuss rules, things taking extensive amounts of time, very steep learning curve, things like that, before you really get into it. And so I would compare War Room to German tanks during World War II. A very high quality game. It attempts to do everything well, and for the most part it does each individual thing pretty well, but there's just so much going on, so much that it tries to do, so many different facets of the game that you have to learn. And then, okay, you've got to stop what you're doing over here, and now we've got to do this. And now once this complex thing over here is done, now we've got to do this unrelated complex thing. I found it to be more complex, more time-consuming, and that isn't just the game that we played, but that is my assumption based on what I've seen just about the complexity of everything, how long a regular game would take just to try and get through, and then to try and teach it to other people as well. I would have a difficult time, I think, finding enough friends who'd be willing to put in that kind of time in order to learn that. But I'm not speaking for everybody. I did enjoy the game. Don't want to give any false impressions about that. But I don't think that it's a game that my gaming group probably would want to play, especially on a regular basis. I think Axis and Allies represents probably the level of complexity and the amount of time devotion that we'd be willing to give. But if you do want something, maybe you're a global player, maybe you want something more complex, at least as time-consuming, if not more so, than Axis and Allies, then War Room is definitely something to check out. I think it's a fantastic game. Like I said, it tries to do a lot of things really well, and it does those things. I just personally feel that it is overly complex and overly engineered in a sense. But again, that's just one person's opinion. I greatly appreciate a lot of the concepts of the game. I think they're really cool. I really admire what is being attempted, and the level of detail that went into all of those things. And I appreciate the Big E inviting me up to give that game a chance. And again, Larry Harris for loaning out or giving out copies so gamers such as myself and Big E can get a chance to play. I encourage all of you, if you're fans of Axis and Allies, to try and give it a shot. Whether that means getting your own copy or trying to, go somewhere and demo it and see if it's for you. Maybe it's what you're looking for, maybe not. It is a very unique game. I've never played anything quite like it. So those are my thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that feedback and that commentary is helpful. This is a very new game. And those are my thoughts on it.